college basketball, our ACC men's basketball teams bombing or just late bloomers? That's Will. I'm Jim, and this is ACC Nation. In week one of the AP Top 25, essentially the preseason, the top five, Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas, Villanova, and Texas. Well, how about the ACC? In week one, Duke was at 9, North Carolina 19, Florida State 20, Virginia 25. And in the receiving votes category, it was Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Notre Dame, and Louisville. That's quite a lineup. We're going to get into where are they now in just a second. But let's talk a little bit about college basketball in general. Will, has this been one of the more topsy-turvy seasons that you've seen so far, starting from November to like the beginning of January?
Feels like it, to be honest with you. I mean, we've seen, a lot of results, not just in the ACC, but in college basketball in general, that make you just kind of scratch your head and say, what the puck?
Bing,
yes.
Points.
But and literally it started that first night of the season when Virginia lost to Navy. And, and we've seen, like we're pointing out with the ACC, we've seen a lot of weird losses, but, teams that have not looked as good as expected. Arkansas being one of them out of the SEC, who, a lot of people thought they could be a sleeper in the SEC. They've just kind of disappeared into thin air almost. They're just not as good this year. It's just been a real weird topsy-turvy year. And then, like, as soon as you think what's going to happen, it all just goes away. And I think it's fair to say at this, what's that?
It goes to hell in a handbag.
Hell in a handbag. But I think we could also say, to be fair, I mean, like, it felt like roughly 1/3 of the D1 basketball teams have been on COVID pause at this point of the year. And when you have to take a pause like that, it does kind of affect you, at least early on. And that's that might have something to do with it, but still coming out and, losing the teams you shouldn't lose at. I feel like that's just happening a lot this year.
Yeah. It's not for lack of talent either. That's the thing.
Right.
A lot of these teams that are losing are stacked. And it's like, where's the focus? Where is the focus that you typically see in college basketball? Don't see it this year. Not like we have, it's not every team. Certainly can't say that about every single team in that AP Top 25. There's a handful of them that are playing ball like, well, this is the way we always play ball, so why should we do anything differently? But the majority of teams just seem to be, I don't know, man. Their head is in the cloud or something. It's just not right. There's something off.
Or their heads are, in a certain other part of the body. But
it's dark.
Yeah. Dark and brown.
I won't try to analyze that.
Yeah.
Gee whiz. All right. So
time to get ourselves back on track.
That's right. So we looked at the top five, basically the preseason top five. Now in week 10, who are the top five? Well, it's Baylor. Gonzaga is back into the top five. They've kind of been flirting with disaster. UCLA is back into the top five. They also have been flirting with disaster. Auburn's there. USC is there. Some of these earlier teams like Texas, Villanova, Kansas, peeled, man. And it's not like they've dropped completely off the face of the earth or anything. It's just that, man, they're just not playing like we thought they were going to. So now in week one, we talked about who was from the ACC was in the AP Top 25. Duke at 9. That's an important number, 9. North Carolina, Florida State, and Virginia. And of course, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Notre Dame, Louisville receiving votes. So where are they now? Duke went as high as number 2 and is now back to number 9. And if they lose while we're talking here, which there's a possibility they may, because they have been kind of going back and forth, is it
I'll just tell you right now, we are recording during the game, and it's early in the second half, and Duke has just blown the game open. It's an 18-point game now. Yeah.
Well, at one point it was not.
Yeah, it was close at halftime.
That's right. So Wake Forest was really showing that they can be in the game. But again, Duke is at a completely different level this year than obviously, apparently, most of the ACC, but not totally, because Duke has lost and has had some really tight games that you got to scratch your head, man. What is going on here? So like I said, Duke is at number 9. They went as high as number 2. Where is everybody else? There's literally nobody else from the ACC in the top 25 or even in receiving votes category. Zip. So that's how far things have. That's why the question, has ACC men's basketball bombed, or are they just late bloomers? That's a good question. We're mid-January, and since teams have been playing since early November, you'd think you should expect more. In fact, there's no doubt in my mind, Will, that several teams are just simply underperforming. Question is, again, bomb, late bloomer. Let's look at some of the latest scores too, because before we get into looking at each one of these teams, and give us your thoughts on these games as I go through here. And like I said, these are some of the latest scores. Florida State over Miami, 65-64. Okay, close game.
Good game.
Yeah, it was. It was a great game.
We were talking about that on our chat last night.
Yeah.
Was down to the wire. That's Miami was undefeated in the ACC until last night, until that last play. And yes, I believe it was a foul, as much as I was kind of hoping Miami won just to kind of build momentum off of the win at Duke. But great effort, good game by Florida State getting that win, because they absolutely needed it.
Whereas most people who are observers of most things ACC wise, ACC refs, go ACC. Another game, Miami over Duke, 76-74. Another great game, an upset, obviously. Florida State defeated Louisville, 79-70, a little closer probably than it should have been in my eyes, but who's to say? Notre Dame, 72, Georgia Tech, 68. That was an overtime game. Pitt just getting by Boston College, 69-67. An overtime game, Wake Forest over Syracuse, 77-74. Now, UNC didn't have any problem dispatching Virginia. That was a 74-50 win. Clemson over NC State, 70-65, another close game. Notre Dame over UNC. Now, here's another confusing one, 78-73, the Irish on top there. Miami just getting by Syracuse, 88-87. And then Louisville defeats Pitt, but only by 3, 75-72. Craziness. And we expect that in the ACC, because the ACC is a pretty competitive conference when it comes down to basketball. But again, Will, are we bombing, or are we just late bloomers?
You remember the show The Critic, right? With Jay Sherman?
Yes.
So I'm just going to use a quote from that show when he described a lot of his movies. It stinks. Yeah, that's the ticket. No.
Yeah, that's your ticket.
Yeah, I'm using another John Lovitz voice there, but no. It's just inconsistent for the most part. I mean, you look at the resumes of all these teams, with the exception of a couple, a lot of these just have some bad losses. I mean, Duke's losses are to Ohio State. Okay, you can Make that on the road at Ohio State. Okay.
All right.
Losing at home to Miami. Miami's currently, in first place in the league. That can be explained because Miami, for once, actually is healthy, and that has what's held them back for the last couple of years.
Right.
They've had some talent, but by this point of the season, they had like 7 healthy players. And but at the same time, Isaiah Wong was having to do everything because of all those injuries. And Cam McGusty, who's really shown out this year for them, and is having a great season for the Hurricanes.
Right.
So, and Miami again, they've had their own kind of questionable losses in the preseason as well. When you go back and look, there's a lot of weird losses. I think they had a weird loss early in the season as well. Dayton, that's who it was, on a neutral. They lost by 16 to Dayton, who's barely in the top 100 on KenPom, but they've also won at Duke, as we mentioned. In Louisville, they're right up there at the top of the league as well. They have 3 losses outside of the top 100 in KenPom: Furman at home, DePaul at home, and at Western Kentucky. Not good. They as we record here on Wednesday night, they're going to be taking on NC State. They are favored, but you look at NC State's KenPom ranking of 116. They're right in that territory with those teams they've just lost to. It's losable, but you probably think Louisville wins that one. North Carolina, okay, you can understand them losing to Purdue, Tennessee, and Kentucky, but not to Kentucky by 29 points. That one makes no sense. I mean, they are a lot better than that. I mean, Notre Dame, losing at Notre Dame, excusable. Notre Dame can be a good team, and we could talk about them next. They got blown out by Boston College, who is probably, it was probably by KenPom ranking the second worst team in the ACC behind Pitt. Notre Dame barely beat Pitt. And to be honest with you, Pitt should have won that game. That's just where ACC basketball is. And I mentioned, some of the other teams that have, up there up at the top. Okay, Duke, we mentioned, their losses. Florida State lost to South Carolina. They're outside the top 100 in KenPom. Got blown out by Florida, and they're an okay team. They'll probably make the tournament, but that's a weird loss. Lost to Syracuse at home. You usually don't see Florida State lose this much at home. Obviously, they got blown out by Wake Forest at their place, but we're finding out, okay, Wake Forest, good team this year, despite the fact that they're down, as we speak, they're down 16 to Duke at their place. But and then I mentioned Virginia. They have losses to Navy and James Madison, and blown out at home by 17 points against Clemson. And then obviously Armando Bacot basically just bullied them the whole game against them on Saturday. Is there a chance that this thing could improve? Sure, there's a chance. You need a team to actually break away from the pack, or a couple of them. And, we need teams to stack up some quality wins and not turn around and lose to somebody inexplicably the next night to hurt that loss. And we kind of saw the joke, hashtag one bid ACC, going the last weekend. Obviously that's not going to happen. In Duke's, they're not going to get, half the league in this year. They're not getting 8 teams in this year. It might be realistic to say they might get 4 or 5. It's still not a good year for the ACC, but look, there's potential, but a lot's going to have to happen.
Let's talk about that potential, because there are some teams there that we know they're underperforming. They have the talent, they have the ability to come back, and this might be under the just blooming or late bloomers. We've seen this before in the ACC. We've seen teams struggle right up until the tournament, and then all of a sudden it's like, where was this team all season? And then they roll out of the ACC tournament into the NCAA and sometimes do really well, or sometimes just fall flat on their face. But yeah, let's go down a couple of these teams. We'll start at the top here with Boston College. Nobody expected Boston College to be good this year for a variety of reasons. New coach, limited roster, just a lot of rebuilding going on. But yet, the coach has come in and really done some marvelous things with the talent he does have, and has done okay. So I cannot apply the bomb label to Boston College this year. I also can't say that they're just blooming either, because they're just in that in between. And I don't see them surprising anybody down the stretch.
Yeah, they might pull off a win or two here and there still. But yeah, they're you really had to set your expectations kind of low with Boston College this year, just because there was a new coach, just a giant roster turnover. This is by nowhere close to what Earl Grant wants to play. I mean, he definitely wants a more defensive style, and we've seen that in spurts, but the talent just isn't there right yet. But we've seen them, like you said, they've jumped up and blew out Notre Dame at home. They've also lost at home to Albany, who is ranked just inside the top 300 in KenPom. So a lot of variance there. But they've also, like I said, they've also been competitive with a team like Rhode Island, who, they're top 80 on KenPom. They lost to them by 8 on the road, played them again on a neutral, and lost to them by 6. So it's not like they got blown out or anything. They say the talent level is just not there. Now, Wednesday, they are home against Georgia Tech as we record tonight. That game has yet to tip off, and they have a shot at winning that one. Probably not very many more the rest of the month, maybe until they play Pitt at the end of the month. But there might not be very many more wins. But what you're looking for is opportunity to build for the future.
Let's go to Syracuse next, because this is a team that always just befuddles me. Boeheim has, he's so set in his ways. He has a set way of doing things. And sometimes when he has the right personnel, that all works out fine and dandy. But, you've got to have the right combo. And I don't know that he's had the right combo there for quite a while. It's a running joke that they're that last 4 in team with the NCAA tournament almost every year. It's like, okay, let's just go ahead and stick them up on the whiteboard there as one of the last 4 teams in. I don't know that they're going to be in that position this year.
Yeah, the reason being is their defense is terrible. And they gave up 100 points to Colgate for one. Have given up some pretty astronomical numbers. 89 to Auburn. Granted, Auburn's one of the best teams in the country. Had a double overtime game against Indiana where they gave up 110 points. But they've also lost to Georgetown, who is nowhere near as good this year as in years past. But at the same time, we've seen them keep themselves in games because they can shoot the ball so well. They're a pretty good 3-point shooting team. Obviously, Buddy Boeheim is kind of the catalyst for that. He is a good 3-point shooter. So is his brother Jimmy, who's really good too, and so is Joe Girard. So they have 3, and Cole Swider too. They all shoot roughly 35% or higher on 3-point shots. But like I said, they don't defend very well. Their team shoots pretty well. They're from both 2 and 3. They don't defend. They don't really get they give up a lot of offensive rebounds. I should say that. The schedule, but really what it is their 2-3 zone just doesn't work the same now, because because a lot of that is you're forced to take these threes, and that's what teams are a lot of teams offenses are kind of set up on nowadays,
Right.
is the 3-point percentage. That's the way analytics has taken the game nowadays. And when you get teams that shoot the three really well, that kind of poses a problem for their zone.
I've always looked at using exclusively a zone, which, they don't always exclusively use it, but it's pretty much 90% of the time. It's gimmicky.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's sort of like the triple option in football. There just comes a time at which, people don't see it that often or whatever. But in basketball, that's a whole different, mindset. We see zones.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We see zones. In football, we don't see the triple option very often. And triple option is something that you've got multiple ways of going. So that can really screw with defenses. But offenses look at a 2-3 zone and go, whatever. And they work around it. I honestly, I like Jim as a coach. But good Lord, man, come on.
Got to think he's got to be real close to hanging it up.
Yeah, it is. And, I almost hate to say that. There's a place for him, and he does what he's got there. But it's just like with a lot of other coaches. There just comes a point. And I think you're at that point. Let's go over to Pitt. There needs to be improvement here. I struggle to see it. And I've seen discussion about whether coach keeps his job.
Yeah, I kind of wonder that too. When you look at this, might be the worst Pitt team actually, I'll take that back. This is the worst Pitt team they've had since the one that's the last year of Kevin Stallings in 2018, where they literally lost to everybody and just flat out embarrassed that program. And this year they've had some really bad losses. They lost to the Citadel on opening night. They lost to UMBC. They lost to Monmouth. But they got into league play. 1 point loss to Virginia. 1 point loss to Notre Dame. 3-point loss to Louisville. So, and they beat Boston College by 2. So they've shown that in league play, they can actually hang with people. They just don't have the talent to get over that hump. Yeah. They turn the ball over a lot. They don't shoot the ball very well. They don't force turnovers much, but they do have, like I said, they have some nice players. John Hughley is a real nice player on the inside. Femi Odekale is a pretty good player. They just don't have a whole lot else. There's this, and you look at the schedule, and I've got KenPom pulled up in front of me. They're not projected to win another game the rest of the season. So that tells you where they are. And yeah, I think it's safe to say Capel is just not the answer for that school right now. And which is a shame, because that team had a lot of talent last year. We thought they were about a year away from making the NCAA tournament, and then everybody left. And
yeah,
it's kind of sad, because like I said, that team probably, if they would have been able to keep it together, probably would have been the NCAA tournament this year. But it's clear that Blake Griffin pretty much is the only reason Jeff Capel is a head coach.
Yeah, something has gone amiss there, and
a little bit.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him in there one more year, just given an opportunity. But at some point, there needs to be a moving on there. Here's the next team up. A lot of people were talking about, and you and I had this conversation about we didn't see it, or you specifically said you didn't. I think you didn't see this. Mike Bray and Notre Dame being the team to keep an eye on this year in the ACC. I wasn't sure. I thought they were going to be better, and I thought maybe it was going to be a return of what we expected out of the Irish. I haven't really seen that.
Yeah, I hear, and they have some highs. I mean, they beat Kentucky earlier in this year, but they got blown out by Boston College and needed overtime to beat Georgia Tech. There's a lot of highs and lows there. They've lost to St. Mary's, who's a good team. Texas A&M is a good team. Illinois is a good team, and they lost to Indiana, who's a good team too. But like I said, there's some questionable results in here that make you wonder, wonder about this team, and they are a little bit topsy turvy. They can shoot; they're a good shooting team. Blake Wesley, all of a sudden, could be a one and done. A lot of people are thinking he could be that for them as a guard. They've got Prentice. It's weird because Prentice Hub has not been quite the factor this year I thought he would be. He's come off the bench some, and is not playing as much, which, I thought he played really well at the end of last season. I thought he was due for a breakout year, and he just hasn't been quite the player. But they do have some good, like I say, they consistently, have some good shooters Dane Goodwin's a really good 3-point shooter. I mentioned Wesley's at 34%, Cormac Ryan's at 35%, Nate Lashevsky's at 44%. They can shoot the three pretty well. I think they're about 35% from three for the season. But the key to them is turnovers. They don't turn the ball over much. And that when you can do that, you have a pretty good shot of winning basketball games. But like I said, we've seen them on 2 occasions so far at conference play struggle with the bottom of the league.
Since we're up in that neighborhood in northern Indiana near Chicago, I'll just say this. You had mentioned prior to us going on the air about me having a caterpillar. This is my George McCaskey look, the CEO of the Chicago Bears. And so this is in my support for getting a decent GM and head coach for once.
Well, the difference is you're not going to look like a fool on national TV.
It's true. Oh my God. Yeah, there are times when people need to shut the hell up.
Yeah, think.
My God. Foot, meat, mouth. Let's go on to Louisville. I'm really disappointed in Louisville, and for me, there are a variety of things that are going on there, and I'm looking at a bomb.
They like we mentioned earlier, they have 3 really bad losses outside of the conference, and their one loss last Saturday night to Florida State. Okay, that's reasonable. Florida State at home is pretty good. They're a tough team at home. Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, 10-5 overall, 4-1 in the league. They're right up there with them. But like I said, we've seen them on 3 separate occasions just lose to teams that are not good. And some of that's Chris Mack wasn't coaching the team at the time. We have to keep that in mind. But now that they're back, he's back. They're playing better, but they're not. The thing is they're not a very good shooting team. They don't shoot the three very well. They shoot 31% from three. It's just their defense is what's keeping them in games. They're defending pretty well. Ranked, their teams shoot 30% from three against them. That's a big stat. And then they don't allow a lot of offensive rebounds either. But yeah, they have an easy stretch here over the next week or so. They play NC State tonight on Wednesday as we record. Then Saturday they have Pitt, and that's at Pitt, and then a home game against Boston College. But then they have a pretty rough stretch right after that. Notre Dame at home, at Virginia, Duke at home, Carolina at home. So the end of the month's going to get real tough for them, and we'll really see where they are by then.
Up next, Virginia Tech, and I hesitate to say bomb here because I'm confounded by where the Hokies are right at this moment. I would tend to believe that in the next couple of weeks, just blooming would apply. But man, are they close to a really thin line of being bomb.
Yeah. Who would have thought at this point of the season they wouldn't have a conference win? That's the real weird part. And it's not like they haven't faced, obviously they lost to Duke, at Cameron Indoor, no big deal. Everyone loses there, but they lost at home to NC State. That's not good. NC State is not a good team. That's a bad loss. They, as we mentioned, on Wednesday, as we're recording this, they do play Virginia. That's going to be a real close game. But you see them, they really don't have a huge win on their resume, and they've had the opportunities. Again, when you look at the KenPom rankings, they've played 3 teams in the top 35, 2 of them on neutral courts, and they lost them, and they lost both the neutral court games, and then lost to Duke. They're a good shooting team. They're one of the top 3-point shooting teams in the country, and they're also good at defending the 3. But the thing of it is it feels like they're just not consistent enough. Storm Murphy came in, and a lot of people thought he would be an immediate impact player, but he's kind of looked lost at times. Now he's played a little bit better lately, but still, been a bit underwhelming as a player this year. So I'm curious to see where their trajectory goes here in the coming weeks, because this team, like I say, they've bombed, but I think the potential is there for everything to kind of, go in their favor, but we'll see.
Next up is Virginia, and quite frankly, this is just bomb, and the just blooming part will be next season. I mean, that's the best that I can do for this particular group. And, I know that's disappointing. You're a fan of Virginia, and I know it's disappointing for all fans, but that's the way it goes. It's like Notre Dame having an up and down season, Louisville having an up and down season. When you have teams that are used to winning, Pitt's like that, Syracuse is like that, and then you just have these bad moments, and sometimes they last for more than one season. So you just have to kind of suck it up and know that, you got to rebuild to something. Can't be, this consistency all the time. And that's certainly reflected even in teams like UNC, who are like the gold standard of basketball.
Yeah. And the thing about Virginia is their defense. It's normally one of the best in the country. I mean, we're 2 years ago, they had one of the best defensive metrics ever. The 2020 team that never got to defend its title because of COVID. But you're looking at the last couple of years, the defense has dropped off. But I think some of that this season is because there are just so many new parts to that team that just don't have a firm grasp on the pack line defense. You look at Caden Shedrick, he barely played last year, and he had mono, and he was just sick all year, and he just wasn't able to get a whole lot of time under his belt. Jaden Gardner was at ECU last year. He never had any experience with the pack line. Armand Franklin did to an extent at Indiana, because they played a version of the pack line, but he hasn't been bad defensively. It's just the shooting. He has not been the shooter everyone thought he'd be. The guards, Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman, they've been themselves. And also they just the depth, the bench depth hasn't been there. They're playing, some guys who don't have Cody Statman's been there for a few years, but his playing time has been inconsistent. Francisco Cafaro must dip his hands in grease before games, because he just doesn't look like he can hang on to the basketball to save his life. They bring, Tate Murray's a freshman. He's been getting, some playing time lately, but again, he's a freshman. Doesn't have a ton of experience in the pack line. But you said it, next year is sort of the year, because they bring in a top 15 recruiting class. There should be some things to look forward to in a positive sense. But yeah, I think at this point, if Virginia gets to the NCAA tournament, that'll be a successful season.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it'll be a surprise for me. NC State is up next, and again, here's another team that just is just so many questions about what's going on. There's this. Some days I just feel like there's okay, you're there, and you're just about to bloom, and then I turn around 2 days later, and it's like thud.
Like when they took Purdue to overtime and then suddenly lost to Richmond and Wright State back to back.
Yeah, just like that. Exactly like that, as a matter of fact. Yeah. I don't get it. I really don't. And again, it goes back to what you said. There's a consistency factor or a lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and they say they snapped a 5-game losing streak and beat Virginia Tech in Blacksburg.
Yeah. Big game.
Yeah.
Big win. Solid win in the ACC.
To be honest, their defense has struggled. And I think a lot of that has to do with not having Manny Bates. I mean, he got hurt in the first game of the year and he's out for the year, but they just don't have a lot of pieces to help fill that. And, their defense, they don't fend very well at all anywhere. The only good thing they do is they don't turn the ball over a lot. And that's really the key. We've seen a big improvement from Darian Sebron this year. He's a very good player, probably will end up on an all ACC team this year. Mm-hmm. And I think I've been a Kevin Keatts supporter, but my thinking is his Cedar region might be getting a little warm.
Yeah. I've heard chatter along those lines, and I'd say that the overall results and the amount of time that he's been there, probably, yeah.
And the thing of it is, he's yet to make the NCAA tournament. Now, they would have made it in 2020 had there not been a pandemic, but still, he hasn't made the tournament. That's not good.
Yeah. There's a lot of 2020 hindsight in that too. So, Duke, let us point out again that this is Coach K's departure tour.
What?
Yeah. It's kind of weird, man. I mean, it's one of those things that I think about this as, I guess, as it gets closer, we get closer to the tournament, and just sort of reflecting on a lot of the things that he's done for that program, which in turn has helped the ACC immensely. He's done a lot for the NCAA. He's done a lot for Team USA. He's contributed a lot of positive things. And I know that, even at one point in my fandom, I was not a fan of Ferret Face. And but as you grow a little bit, you look at what he's accomplished, what he does, how he goes about things, and there should be respect from everybody for Coach K. I mean, as somebody, I guess if I were fans for other teams, I might not miss him one bit considering what he's done, but just overall, you have to look at it and go, this has helped the conference. This guy's helped the conference. He's elevated all of us because we've all shot for him and that team to beat them. And it was a big thing when you beat Duke. So that's a plus. And this year so far, I think they're just blooming. That team seems to be getting better and better. And we'll see where that all ends up. I can actually see them. I don't know at this point if I feel like they could take the entire NCAA tournament, but they're certainly going to be a Sweet 16 team.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's really helped them this year is the guard play has been a lot better this year. And obviously it helps to have a Paolo Banchero type who's, going to be really good at a lot of different things, but seeing the improvement of Wendell Moore to the level he has, Trevor Keel's really stepping up as well. AJ Griffin as well. He has really played well of late. All these guys are freshmen, and they're filling needs that this team did not have. This team did not have last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned they are much better this year. You see that this team is a lot better. They're not going to have a guy quitting on them in the middle of the season this year, I don't think, unless things go south. But I don't anticipate that in this version of the ACC. And the turnovers, they don't turn the ball over a lot. They're top 10 in turnover percentage. Their shooting percentage is top 25. They're everything they do, they're generally pretty good at. And it's not like they are like putting up a ton of points on everybody. I mean, yeah, they are, but I mean, to an extent, but it's not like they're doing it to everybody. I mean, remember the Gonzaga game, 3-point game. They were a lot better in that game than I think the score indicated. All these other games, they've won by double digits. Obviously, the Georgia Tech game where he got into it with, I think it was Michael DeVoe over something, but
yeah,
they say they just had a bad loss, or not a bad loss, but they just had a home loss to Miami. And as we record, they're up 14 with about 2.5 left on Wake Forest. So they'll get another a solid win there. And then they'll have NC State at home, at Florida State, Syracuse, Clemson at home, and then 3 road games in a row at Louisville, at Notre Dame, and at North Carolina. That should be an interesting stretch right there. And I'm curious to see how many. I think they'll take at least one L in that stretch.
Yeah, kind of feels like they may, and it could be. Though I hesitate to say this, could be at Chapel Hill.
That's kind of what I was thinking too.
Just because of the emotional aspect of it. But again, emotion also plays into the hands of Duke, because Duke gets pumped up for that game.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of North Carolina, here's a team I feel like it started out with the potential of being a bomb and is blooming.
Yeah. I remember the second game of the year where Brown gave them a game for 40 minutes, and they won by 7, but Brown led for a good chunk of that game. Lost to Purdue by 9 on a neutral. Okay, fine. Lost to Tennessee by 17 on a neutral. Okay, fine. Beat Michigan, but that at home by 21, but that win isn't looking very good right now, because Michigan's been one of the most disappointing teams in the country this year. Got blown out in Vegas by Kentucky by 29. Lost at Notre Dame. Okay, that's fine. Blew out Virginia. Say Armando Bacot bullied them. But yeah, the thing of it is what's kept their defense isn't as good, that great. Especially like they don't force a lot of turnovers. They're shooting the ball pretty well, but their offensive rebound percentage is nowhere near what it's been in years past. They don't crash the boards the same way under Hubert Davis that they do against Roy Williams. I think he wants him to get back more on defense, maybe because he knows the defense isn't that good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Wake Forest, who is certainly not a bomb, is blooming and continues to. I mean, and they gave Duke a pretty decent run for the money in that game that is going on while we are recording.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the coach has done an immense job there of rebuilding that team. You've brought this up before about, you could see that if you knew his background and knew what he was capable of and look at his resume, that was what was going to happen with Wake Forest. He has turned that system around very quickly.
Yeah, only a couple of years. And, with the transfer portal being as big as it is, it's really sped up the process. I mean, we didn't expect Alondas Williams and Jake LaRavia to be, potential all ACC caliber players, this year, but they've been the catalyst for Wake Forest's success. they're, I say Williams has been kind of a huge factor for the Deacs this year, helping them to, some of the overtime win over Northwestern, beating Virginia Tech by 19, the win over Florida State by 20 plus, beating Syracuse in overtime. I mean, they took the loss to Duke tonight, but some of that is they're just, they're just undermanned compared to Duke. And Jake LaRavia had to sit out a lot because he picked up 3 fouls in the first half. But they're one of the top 2-point shooting teams in the country, shooting just under 60% from 2-point ranges. They get a lot of the buckets on the inside. And that's where, they're doing a lot of the work. After this, they have Virginia on the road Saturday. That's going to be an interesting game. That's going to be a tough game. And again, I think right now Steve Forbes is ACC Coach of the Year. What he's done with this team is really impressive.
Speaking of Coaches of the Year, you might also want to look at Clemson here just quickly too. Maybe not at the same level, obviously, as Steve Forbes, but Clemson has done a pretty decent job. I just didn't. I saw this program sort of coming to a head, and being done, but they're not doing too bad this season.
I have not been. I have not a Brad Burnell guy. I have never seen it and seen it in him. He had one good NCAA tournament run, the 2018 tournament, where Bleep went haywire in the first round, and everything just nothing made sense other than the national champion. But they've had some losses to teams like St. Bonaventure and West Virginia, especially, where they dominated for 30 minutes, but then just couldn't do anything the final 5-10 minutes of the game that caused them to lose. They blew out Virginia at home in Charlottesville by 17, then turned around, lost to them at home by 10. And they just got blown out tonight by Notre Dame. I think they lost by 16, I think it was. Yeah, they lost 72-56 to Notre Dame. And like I say, I'm not very impressed with Brad Brownell. I feel like this team they have pieces. I like PJ Hall. He's a good player. Outside of that, I mean, Nick Honor's a good 3-point shooter. And so is Alamir Dawes. And Hunter Tyson's a pretty good 3-point shooter, but I just don't see it in this team. I feel like they're ready to kind of take a step back. Maybe not right away because they play Boston College, Syracuse, and Pitt, but I just don't see it in this team.
Josh Pastner in Georgia Tech.
It just really says it all. In opening night, they lost to Miami of Ohio, but they went off and won 5 in a row. But they also didn't play anybody. They didn't play anybody of substance in that stretch. And when they started playing good teams, they lost to Wisconsin, lost to North Carolina, lost to LSU, lost to USC, lost to Louisville, lost to Duke, lost to Notre Dame in overtime. They're 0-4 in the league this year. Granted, they've had a really tough conference schedule so far, as I just mentioned. They they play Boston College tonight on Wednesday night, so we don't know how that game is faring. But I think this team's really showing you just how much Jose Alvarado meant to this Georgia Tech program. I mean, definitely. Without him, they just look really bad.
We've talked about the injury bug at Miami, and Isaiah Wong really carrying the 2 buckets of water, and maybe more for them for the last couple of seasons, and it seems to be coming together here. But is this team? I mean, they're close. They're close to they keep winning by a point or losing by a point. And it's like, holy smokes, dude, are you getting ready to bloom on us, or are you going to bomb? Which one is it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you talked about it. They've had a lot of several close games this year. Florida Atlantic won by 2, beat Penn State by 5. They had the Syracuse game, they won by 1, beat Duke by 2, lost to Florida State by 1. They don't play again until next Tuesday, the 18th, and they have North Carolina at home. That'll probably be a close game. Yeah, Florida State at home, that should be a close game again. Yeah. But what's keeping them in it is shooting. They're shooting pretty well from inside and outside. They don't turn the ball over much. But the thing of it is their defense. They're not a great defensive team. If they can't hit their shots, they're not going to win games.
Right. Yeah. You cannot depend solely on offense running scores up all the time and not doing, playing both sides of the ball. We've seen that on the football field this past season. Let's look at Florida State here, because man, this is a team that, quite honestly, I'm a little disappointed here. But are they starting to click?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I say they're probably one of the more disappointing teams I've felt this season. They were my pick to win the league this year, and they're 9-5 overall, 3-2 in the ACC. I mean, they're still in it. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go, but they say blown out by Florida at their place. Needed overtime to beat Boston University. Blown out by Purdue. Lost by 3 at home to Syracuse. Lost by 1 to South Carolina, and South Carolina is not very good. Close win over NC State on the road. Got blown up by 22 against Wake Forest. Obviously, the 1-point win over Miami in a rivalry game. So, but yeah, they have some bad losses, but they don't. I wouldn't say they have that signature win just yet. Now, Louisville, Miami are currently, 2 of the top teams in the standings, but they're not. I don't know if they would qualify. There would be. I don't have the net ranking up in front of me, but I can't imagine they're going to be, more than a quad 2 win at this point.
So coming up on our next program, we're going to have a special guest. Kelly Quinlan will be joining us. He's been with us several times, talked football, basketball, and Georgia Tech sports in general. So we're going to find out from Kelly a little more about what's going on at Georgia Tech. First, we're going to talk about the football program, because there's a lot of changes going on there, and what he thinks may be transpiring, and if Collins will have another year or so to make things work or not. And then we'll talk about Passner and the basketball program and see how that all works out. That's Kelly Quinlan coming up on our next program. So I hope you'll join us.